Chapter 2 Tattle. Link lay on his hands and knees. He watched his fingers flex over the handle of his blade, fallen on the ground. I'm alive, he thought in disbelief. How am I still alive? There were enormous petals beneath him. He'd landed on a massive flower. Link stood, bringing his sword and shield into his hands. The flower's large surface was soft and flat, and the hole at its center was wide enough for his foot to slip into. The flower was rooted at the base of an even larger puddle of water, directly beneath the deep chasm. The ceiling was non-existent. The dirt walls stretched upward into infinite darkness. I fell for so long, he thought. How did a flower break my fall? A light blinded him, ripping his attention away from the hole above. He shielded his eyes at first, eventually dropping his hands to find the imp, the Skull Kid with the mask. He levitated across the pond in between two torches now crackling with life. His mask hid all facial expressions, arms folded across his chest in relaxation. The purple and white fairies were on either side of him, watching the events with what might have been regret. Link didn't see Epona anywhere. "What's with that stupid horse of yours?" asked the Skull Kid, losing his playful tone of voice. The words were now icy and sharp. "It doesn't listen to a word that's said to it. There's no point in writing a thing like that, so I did you a favor." "And got rid of it." He chuckled, appearing barely able to stifle uncontrollable laughter. Link couldn't believe his ears. "Epona? Dead?" "You..." began Link, but he couldn't find the words. Suddenly, his fear turned to anger, and his hand firmly gripped the handle of his sword. His face must have expressed this because the imp laughed again. "Oh, boo-hoo! Why the sad face? I just thought I'd have a little fun with you." "A little fun?" exclaimed Link angrily, holding his sword up and pointing it at the imp. He stood firmly on the flower in the middle of the puddle, ready to fight. "You killed Epona!" "Killed?" inquired the Skull Kid, arms still folded, floating comfortably on some invisible bed. "I never said that." "You got rid of her!" said Link. She was the last person I had from home, and you took her from me!" The Skull Kid laughed, though the two fairies merely floated beside him silently. "It's just a stupid horse!" he exclaimed. "Shut up!" Link yelled, cutting his sword across the empty air threateningly. Instantly, the imp froze. All traces of humor were gone. "Oh, come now. Do you really think you can beat me as I am now? Fool!" Link's first instinct was to move forward, but the Skull Kid reacted first. He rocked his head from side to side, his mask sizzling with a vibrant spectrum of colors. The blues, yellows, purples, and greens worked their way toward him as the magic of the Skull Kid filled the room. The air surrounding Link grew heavy as the spell's grip tightened. He thrust his head upward to gasp for air, but then everything went black. He stood in a vast, empty space, filled only with the sound of coarse leaves bristling against each other, swaying. He recognized the sound instantly. Deku scrubs. Link ran from the noise, but soon it was everywhere. Everything! The little wooden creatures were covered in red leaves that cascaded from the top of their heads to their midsections. They were child-sized and stick-like atop two twiggy legs. Long wooden snouts protruded below their glowing orange eyes. They were a head shorter than Link, but he was vastly outnumbered. He stood no chance against the army of Deku scrubs. Link tried to sprint away, but they closed him off, surrounding him with the rustling of leaves. He covered his ears and closed his eyes, but he was unable to end the madness. He let out a loud scream. And then it stopped. The Skull Kid was there again, still levitating luxuriously with his arms across his chest. The two fairies remained floating by his side. Link was unable to read their expressions. He went to take a step forward, but when he did, he felt his hands. His sword and shield were no longer there, but that wasn't the problem. His hands were made of wood. He held them in front of his eyes only to find that his whole arm had changed. His appendages were now made of moist, flexible bark, more like the trunk of a sapling than a full-grown tree. Link looked past his hands to see that his torso also bore the same texture, bare of any shirt. His tunic was gone. All that remained was a green pair of shorts. His legs and feet were just as wooden as the rest of his body. Link hesitantly peered over the petals of the flower into the pond's reflection. He screamed a high-pitched wail. It sounded like it belonged to a young, defenseless animal, which was true. The Skull Kid's spell had turned him into a Deku scrub. A hollow, open-ended snout and glowing eyes stared back at him from the water. Instead of long, red leaves cascading down to his waist, he only had a crop of blonde hair. It hardly covered his forehead, just like in his human form. His funnel-shaped hat still adorned his head, but it now ran the length of his entire body. Link trembled in disbelief, his smaller heart thumping wildly in its wood-like chest. He stumbled back onto the flower and collapsed to his new knees. "I've been cursed!" he realized. The Skull Kid laughed uncontrollably. Hardly able to keep himself airborne as he pointed childishly.
"Now that's a good look for you!"
he exclaimed, floating backward toward the hard dirt wall enclosing the cavern.
"You'll stay here looking that way forever!"
The resolute wall slid open as if obeying the Skull Kid, revealing a secret passage. The purple fairy wordlessly followed the imp, but the white fairy didn't seem to notice. Instead, she stared at the screaming Deku scrub on the flower, appearing transfixed. Link looked up from his fit of despair and saw the Skull Kid and Purple Fairy escaping. He ran after them, tripping in his new body that was almost the same size as his new head. He splashed into the water. Link struggled to get to his tiny feet, but his legs could barely support him. He'd forgotten the white fairy was even there until she flew into his head repeatedly, knocking him back to the ground. She proceeded to stick her tongue out, which was hardly visible from within her bright ball of light. Appearing satisfied, the fairy turned back to return to the Skull Kid. However, she was too late. The imp and Purple Fairy were both already in the passageway, and the Dark Wizard obliviously flew backwards, still laughing maniacally. The Purple Fairy turned around just in time to see her.
Sis!
He exclaimed. The large dirt door slid back into place, cutting them off from each other. The white fairy scrambled for the blank wall.
Whoa! Whoa!
She screamed, trying to get her voice through the door.
Skull Kid, wait for me! I'm still here! Tail, you can't leave without me!
She paused for a second, waiting for an answer, but when none came, she began banging on its surface. Link's arms shook when he tried to sit up again. He was still in shock, a numb mind and a foreign body leaving him without any strength. He managed to stand up after stumbling a few times, fighting against his disproportionately large, dizzy head. Link made a noise that he assumed would have been a scoff or a sigh in his human form, but it came out as a high-pitched squeak. He looked up just in time to see the white fairy, so closely resembling Navi that it pained him, ceasing to bounce against the secret doorway. The fairy's wings drooped in dismay when the door didn't open. However, her wings were quick to pucker back up when she noticed Link was still there.
"Yeah!"
she exclaimed. All it took was that voice, which was in many ways unlike Navi's, for his anger to return. He felt his cheeks would be flushing bright red, his sword drawn at the fairy's sheer nerve. Since Link's facial expression were limited as a Deku scrub, he was forced to resort to clenching his weak stick-like fists as tightly as he could, narrowing his eyes. The fairy stopped flying an inch from his face. Link's orange eyes did not waver in their threatening stare.
"If I wasn't dealing with you, I wouldn't have gotten separated from my brother!"
exclaimed the fairy. Seriously? Link thought. He couldn't find the words to address her mindless aggression.
"Well, don't just sit there, Deku boy! Do something! Why are you looking at me like that? What, is there something stuck on my face? Will you stop staring and just open that door for me?"
Link responded with what might have once been a battle cry. It came out sounding like a wailing cat on its deathbed. He tried to grab her, planning to squeeze the life out of the fairy, but she narrowly avoided his wooden grasp. Link recovered from the dive and turned to charge at the fairy again. She avoided him easily by flying above the Deku Scrub's limited reach. Link jumped up and down angrily, shaking his head in frustration and wailing. He took in another deep breath to speak, but all that came out of his open-ended snout was nonsense. Link tried again, but the rims of his new mouth were not nearly as flexible as his lips had been. Was all Link could get out. He shouted for a little longer and then gave up, collapsing to the floor in dismay. Link sat there, staring at his unfamiliar, monstrous reflection at the edge of the pond.
"Is your temper tantrum finally over?"
asked the white fairy, daring to flutter closer to him. Link didn't even try responding and kept staring at himself instead. He felt a tear trickle along his cheek, tickling slightly as it ran across the rough texture of his new skin. Link wiped it away with a balled fist, whimpering.
"Come on, a helpless little girl is asking you, so hurry up!"
Link took his time summoning the willpower to stand. He walked somberly over to the wall with his head hanging low. It was hard not to trip. It would take some time getting used to his new body. Link ran his tiny hands up and down the dirt wall, as far as his little arms could reach.
"You have to pull that notch over there,"
called out the fairy, flying to join him.
"Oh, it's too heavy for me to get."
She hovered over a portion of the wall that looked slightly out of place. Link grabbed the odd piece of soil, pulled on it. It slid out of place to reveal a hidden groove. The wall reacted by unlatching with the hard-packed earth, forming a separate door. However, it did not slide open smoothly as it had for the Skull Kid. Link bent down and put his fingers underneath the opening, pulling as hard as he could to slide it upward. His weak Deku arms could hardly accomplish it, but he somehow managed to get it wide enough to squeeze through, letting it slam shut behind him. But not before the fairy flew into the dark tunnel with him. The Deku Scrub didn't acknowledge the fairy and began his journey through the narrow tunnel of dirt and rock. He hardly made it a few steps before he heard a familiar twinkling sound. It was the same one every fairy made while flying, a pair of chimes drifting through the air.
"Hey, wait for me! Don't leave me behind!"
The fairy flew directly in front of his face to stop him from walking. Link did just that, narrowing his eyes and making another odd Deku Scrub noise. She took a deep breath from within the comfort of her small radius of light before speaking.
"So, that stuff back there,"
she stammered.
"I, apologize, so take me with you."
Link, once again amazed at her stupidity, almost attacked her again.
"Wait!"
she exclaimed, sensing his aggression. Link held back his urge to swat her against the wall.
"You want to know about that Skull Kid who just ran off, right? Well, I just so happen to have an idea of where he might be going. Take me with you, and I'll help you out. Deal? Please?"
She can't be serious, Link thought, though he was in no position to turn down assistance right now. He was a defenseless young Deku Scrub, lost in an unfamiliar land with no weapons or friends. The only thing that kept him going was his promise to Epona, and the promise to never let his ocarina out of sight. Link had no choice but to agree, even though he'd rather tell her to get lost, despite his inability to speak. Link nodded. The fairy leapt in excitement.
"Good!"
she exclaimed, bobbing up and down at a happy tempo.
"Then it's settled. I'll be your partner. Or at least until we catch that Skull Kid. My name's Tattle. So, it's nice to meet you, or whatever." "I want to talk,"
squeaked Link incoherently.
What?"
asked the white fairy, Tattle, as she called herself.
"Scrub got your tongue?"
Link shook his head angrily. "Focus," he told himself.
Stop! I don't think that's getting you anywhere, commented Tattle dryly. Try talking from your, not your mouth, or something. Your throat? I think what's making it hard is...
Link raised another irritated squeak in response.
Listen, kid, said Tattle. You've clearly got some anger issues, and I don't know your name. Ink,
he interrupted.
Ink, huh?
Protested Link, becoming his de facto no.
Or whatever it is. I think we'd better get going if you want to get your stuff back. Who knows what he'll do with it if we don't?
Link almost protested further, but he didn't. Ugh! There's no way I'm going to figure anything out by screaming. We've got to get out of this tunnel! One thing at a time.
Now that we've got all that straightened out, can we stop messing around and get moving? I'll try and help you as much as I can. I'm not really all that familiar with this place either.
This place? Link thought. There would be time for questions, hopefully. For now, he nodded with his large wooden head and continued walking through the dark tunnel. It was nearly impossible to see in this tight underground cave. If it weren't for Tattle's light bouncing off the walls, he'd be groping blindly. Link awkwardly progressed through the tunnel that became more cave-like as they went. Its floor was cool against his bare feet, and Tattle flew alongside him to light the way. His ancient-looking toes trod carefully on the uneven ground. Link couldn't help but feel a faint sense of excitement. His mind quickly flashed back to trekking through underground tunnels with Navi. No, he corrected quickly. It's too soon to be thinking like that. This fairy was much more annoying than Navi had ever been. The Skull Kid could always just be around the next corner, which would end this whole expedition in a sour confrontation.
Stop!
Exclaimed Tattle. Link froze. Obliviously, he had almost gone right over the edge of another massive crater of death.
Do you ever pay attention to where you're walking?
Link, after catching his balance at the edge of the cliff, looked over at Tattle accusingly.
Don't look at me! You're the one who walks like...
a baby. Link finished in his head, even though she'd stopped. Tattle must have realized that he was practically a newborn given the current circumstances.
Well, that doesn't matter. Just don't go and kill yourself until after I find my brother.
Link scanned the edges of the crater for possible routes across. The small, narrow tunnel he'd been journeying through opened into a massive ditch. The floor of the tunnel sloped into it steeply, as if some landslide had occurred years ago. Signs of an ancient bridge were visible, though the debris now consisted of cracked and shattered stone. Regardless, the walls surrounding the ditch were too sloped to use as a way around, and he was too small to jump across.
It must suck not being able to fly,
commented Tattle, who hovered over the wide ditch easily. It must suck not being able to open doors, thought Link sourly, wishing more than anything that he could speak.
I don't know how you're going to cross.
Link didn't either. The only thing other than dirt and stone was a remnant of another soft, flat flower. It was exactly like the one he'd landed on just minutes ago.
You're a Deku scrub!
Exclaimed Tattle suddenly, flying back to Link's face excitedly. Really, I hadn't noticed.
You can use the Deku flower over there to hover across.
Link looked aside at the large flower. He's seen Deku scrubs sleep and attack from the inside of those plants.
Go ahead and try it.
Tattle floated beside it, beckoning him eagerly to get a move on. Link waddled over to the flower and stared at it cluelessly. How do I use it? He thought. The large stigma was wide enough for him to squeeze into, but it was so loose and wet that it would take hours.
Go on, don't be shy. We don't exactly have all day here,
persisted Tattle. Link glared at her before stepping to the edge of the living flower's hole. He stuck his foot out tentatively, but as soon as he placed it on the wet, mushy base, his foot slid right into place, becoming a part of the flower. It felt natural, easy, and right, as if it were made for him. Link quickly put his other foot inside, and with no effort at all, he slid his whole body into the plant. Link instinctively spiraled into its depths like a corkscrew. His snout was soon the only part of him outside, sticking straight up.
Whoa!
Exclaimed Tattle.
How'd you do that?
Link didn't respond, at peace now with his body and the flower. Even though his eyes were inside of the moist, comfortable plant, he felt his surroundings perfectly. Now one with the ground, even the tiniest vibrations were visible. It was perfect. Link could not remember a time he'd been more content in his human body.
Don't get too comfortable!
Exclaimed Tattle, after Link didn't say or do anything for a good minute or two.
We need to!
Before she could finish her sentence, Link mentally sighed, releasing his comfortable corkscrew position. He shot upward at a frightening speed from the depths of the flower. His whole body was free within a second, and he reached for something to stop himself. His hands grabbed onto the stems of smaller flowers surrounding the larger one. His momentum ripped them from the ground and carried them into the air with him. Tattle watched in astonishment as Link flew, a small flower in each of his hands. When he reached the peak of his ascent, the flowers opened up like parachutes. The wind from his fall gracefully turned the petals. The flowery propellers kept him steady in the air. Link, his feet dangling from his newfound height, squeaked with excitement. He was in the air for only a few seconds before Tattle caught on, flying to hover beside him.
Hurry, before you fall! Go to the other side!
Link kicked his feet to push himself in a different direction. Very slowly, he turned to face the ditch. He pushed himself forward, gliding over as the petals twirled on either side. Once he was halfway across, the petals threatened to give out. Clearly, they couldn't hold his light wooden body for long. Just before he reached the edge, the petals surrendered. The delicate pink propellers collapsed inward. Link plummeted like a rock, letting go of the stems and slamming onto the other side of the hole. He quickly pulled himself off the ledge and scrambled to his feet, panting. Tattle slowly made her way back to the Deku scrub. Link smiled when he looked back up at her, still struggling to catch his breath. His little chest heaved in and out.
I did it,
he thought.
I made it across.
Expecting some sort of praise or astonishment, all Link got was,
Flying's a lot easier.
His smile instantly faded, but he stopped himself from getting angry again.
Don't give her the satisfaction. Help!
Exclaimed Tattle. The twig Link had pulled back smacked the fairy in the face.
Watch what you're doing!
Link squeaked an apology, trudging up the inclined ramp. It was only the 12th time he'd accidentally hit her. The tunnel had continued on for quite a while. The dirt eventually gave way to a stone floor. Though it was covered in overgrowth and decaying, it was a promising sign that civilization wasn't that much further. The dirt tunnel began squaring off, turning into an ancient, narrow hallway that slanted uphill. The thick brush was difficult to venture through, and the Deku Scrub never missed an opportunity to not notice the fairy as he pushed debris aside. It was no easy journey. The brush constantly caught on him, tearing scratches into his oddly textured skin and getting himself stuck.
I bet it was so much easier to get through here before the Skull Kid wrecked this place,
explained Tattle. Link turned in her direction. She's trying to start a conversation, he thought. It was the first time she'd done that since getting him to follow her. He took advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime moment and looked up at the fairy in a gesture to continue.
He's been so reckless. I bet he doesn't even realize how much he's hurting everyone with his evil little pranks.
Evil little pranks? Link thought. That seems to be putting it mildly.
Hey, look!
Link pushed the large bundle of thick-rooted plants out of his way to see what lay ahead. It was a petrified Deku Scrub, right where the hallway finally leveled out. The scrub appeared grown into the ground, its legs becoming roots and its arms and legs becoming tree branches. The only thing that distinguished it from a tree was its long snout and glowing eyes. The corpse, or statue, stared back at them with a profound sadness.
It looks all dark and gloomy,
Tattle said.
Almost like it could start crying any second now. How sad.
Link paused for a moment to look at it too, pulled out of his trance when the fairy called him to continue walking. Nothing we could do for it now. His own troubles made it easy to push that gloomy figure from his mind. The hallway's brush became thinner and sparser as the dead Deku scrub was left further behind. Link, used to only hearing their footsteps and rustling through plant life, noticed a different sound. Is that water?
Do you hear that?
Asked Tattle, catching on too.
That's gotta be the clock tower! I knew we were almost there!
Tattle flew ahead of Link and left him behind in partial darkness. But not complete darkness, he realized. That meant they were nearing the exit. Link ran toward the water, no longer worrying about stumbling in darkness or over thick roots. 1 foot after another, the walls of the hallway whizzed by, with Tattle slowing down to let him catch up. His footsteps echoed against the solid stone floor, no longer meeting grass. The sound of the water hammered in his ears as the last stretch of hallway presented itself. He slowed down to take his final steps, but that feeling returned, the one that accompanied him as he fell through the dark hole. It felt like a trap, some endless cycle. It was a part of him, as it had been during his descent, and he felt pain in his chest as he walked toward the hallway's exit. The room started spinning, and Link stopped walking when he swayed on his feet.
What's wrong?
Asked Tattle. I'm gonna vomit, Link thought. The room kept spinning. He stumbled into the wall on the other side of the hallway.
Hey! Snap out of it! We're finally there!
Link, leaning on the wall now, tried to look up at the exit in the spinning madness. He took in a deep breath and plunged through the uncertainty. The moment he and Tattle exited the underground tunnel, the sickness stopped. As if adding to this finality, a large stone door slid into place, preventing Link or Tattle from going back.
You okay?
Asked Tattle. Link nodded, shaking the last of the queasiness out of his stomach. She seemed slightly phased herself, but the spinning had affected him far worse.
Okay then, we can enter the town if we go through here.
They were inside of an impressively tall stone building. The floor ended at a man-made waterway, boasting a powerful stream. The water turned a wooden wheel attached to a pole that then spun around and out of sight. The water ran from both ends of the room through metal grates, obscuring the beginning and end of the stream. The floor above them was not completely sealed off. A staircase led over the water and to the second floor. The entire building was rather dark, though bright compared to the tunnels. It was expectantly dank, the air cool and wet as water sprayed over the edge of the stone bank.
Come on!
Tattle flew over to the staircase, and Link wandered slowly over as well, looking around to take in the clanking gears. The water powered the entire thing. His wonder increased as he reached the staircase. When he made it to the second floor, he saw that the wooden pole came up from the water wheel straight to the ceiling. Toward the very top, wooden gears turned along with the pole. Eventually, the machinery powered a massive wheel planted firmly into the stone wall near the ceiling. Link didn't quite understand what this accomplished, likely turning something on the outside he couldn't see. Tattle did say it was a clock tower, he realized. He stepped onto the open, empty second floor, broken only by the rising pole. On the other side was a large set of wooden doors. Sunlight peeked in from behind them. Link followed Tattle, still looking at the machinery above with childlike awe. Just before they reached the doors, someone stopped him. You've met with a terrible fate, haven't you? The voice startled Link and Tattle. They turned around to find a man. He stood beside the turning wooden pole, shooting up through the center of the floor. Was he following us? Link thought. I never heard any footsteps. He wore fine, elegant purple robes, but he had an overly large backpack thrown over his shoulders. Masks of all shapes and sizes stuck out of its many openings. The bag bulged with the decorations, pretty close to the size of the man himself. He was hunched over by its weight, which made no sense. No one could have followed them that silently with so much luggage. The lanky, red-headed man was tall, but the crushing weight of his bag made it hard to tell exactly how high he might stand. Link noticed that Tattle was shaking. Is she scared? The fairy cowered behind him. It was not like her to act so frightened. Link remained standing in the doorway a moment longer as the Deku scrub and man stared at each other from across the room. Link stepped away from the wooden doorway, over to the man standing beside the rotating pole. He felt Tattle's hesitancy, but she remained silent and followed diligently from behind. The man with the large bag of masks smiled widely, eyes squinted almost shut. The clanking of the wooden gears continued, accompanied by the water swishing through the grates. Link stood silently, and so the man began the introduction.
Greetings, young one. I own the Happy Mask Shop and travel far and wide in search of masks. During my travels, a very important mask was stolen from me by an imp in the woods.
Huh, straight to the point? Link thought. This man's brief, blunt introduction was completely uncalled for. Link opened his mouth and squeaked softly, in agreement that the Skull Kid was a thief. Clearly, Link wasn't his only victim. The salesman continued, smiling widely.
So, here I am, at a loss. And now I found you!
Tattle summoned the courage to fly out from behind Link, but the salesman didn't even glance at her. He continued looking at Link intently.
Now, don't think me rude,
began the salesman again, putting his arm across his waist and bowing.
But I have been following you, and I know of a way to return you to your former self.
Link squeaked in shock, though Tattle withheld any surprise she might have felt.
If you can get back the precious item that was stolen from you, I will return you to normal.
He remembered, and knew instantly what the man was talking about. There was one thing that had constantly been on his mind other than Epona, and that was the sacred artifact passed down by the royal family. The Ocarina of Time, however, was now in the hands of an immature Skull Kid. Getting it back had already been an objective, but apparently this man could return him to normal with it. The masked salesman saw the acknowledgement fill the Deku Scrub's eyes and continued speaking.
In exchange, all I ask is that you also get back my precious mask that the imp stole from me.
Link's heart sank. He'd been intimidated by the mask ever since he'd first seen it, its terrible eyes imprinted on his memory. He knew there had been something off about it, but now this mysterious man seemed to confirm that. The salesman's smile faltered slightly at Link's dismay.
What? Is it not a simple task? Why, to someone like you, it should by no means be a difficult task.
Link gulped, wondering how this man could possibly know him.
Except the one thing is, I'm a very busy fellow, and I must leave this place in 3 days. How grateful I would be if you could bring it back to me before my time here is up.
Link wished to question him to figure out who he was and to get more details about this imp. But he couldn't, not until this man returned him to normal. Once his voice came back, the rest would follow.
But yes, you'll be fine,
replied the salesman.
I see you are young and have tremendous courage. I'm sure you'll find it right away.
Link nodded and then turned to leave with Tattle. Link walked up to the awesome set of doors and placed his palm upon its surface. The wood was warm.
Well then, I am counting on you,
called out the smiling man as Link pushed the doorway open. The sunlight blinded him.